The Whispering House. On a quiet street in a small town stood an old house. Everyone in the town called it the Whispering House. No one had lived there for years, and most people were too scared to go near it. The windows were cracked, the paint was peeling, and the wooden doors creaked even in the slightest breeze. The house seemed to be alive, as if it was waiting for someone. In the middle of the night, people passing by the house often heard soft whispers. The sound was like someone calling their name, but when they looked around, no one was there. Children would dare each other to touch the house's front door, but they always ran away before doing it. They believed the house was haunted. One day, a family moved into the town. The family had 3 children: Sarah, who was 15, her younger brother, Tim, who was 12, and the youngest, Lily, who was 7. They didn't know about the whispers or the scary stories. They were just happy to have found a big house they could afford. "We're going to fix it up," their father said proudly, as they stood in front of the Whispering House. "It's a bit old, but it's perfect for us." Sarah looked up at the house, feeling uneasy. "It looks creepy," she whispered to herself, but she didn't want to say anything and spoil her family's excitement. The first night in the house, everything seemed normal. They unpacked their things, had dinner, and went to bed early because they were tired from the move. But as soon as the lights went off, the house came alive. Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She was about to fall asleep when she heard it, a faint whisper. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the sound got louder. It sounded like someone was saying her name. "Sarah, Sarah." She sat up quickly, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, but no one answered. She got out of bed and opened her door to check on her family. Tim's room was next to hers, and his door was slightly open. She peeked in. Tim was wide awake, sitting up in his bed, his eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Sarah nodded. "It's just an old house," she said, trying to sound brave. "Old houses make noises." But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Over the next few days, the whispers became more frequent. It wasn't just at night anymore. During the day, while their parents were at work, Sarah and Tim started hearing things. Sometimes it was soft footsteps in the hallway. Other times it was faint laughter coming from somewhere in the house. One afternoon, while their parents were out, Sarah and Tim decided to explore the house. They had unpacked most of their things, but there was one room they hadn't been in yet, the basement. "Let's check it out," Tim said, trying to sound brave. "Maybe we'll find something cool." The basement door was at the end of a dark hallway. As they opened it, a cold draft rushed past them, making them shiver. The stairs leading down were old and creaky, and the air smelled musty. Sarah held a flashlight as they descended the stairs. At the bottom, they found an old room filled with dusty furniture, broken boxes, and spider webs. But there was something else. In the far corner of the room, there was a door. It was smaller than a regular door, almost like it was made for a child. "That's strange," Tim said, pointing to it. "Why would there be a door like that down here?" Sarah walked over to it and reached for the handle. It was cold to the touch. As soon as she pulled the door open, a gust of icy wind blew past them, and they heard a faint whisper. "Sarah." Sarah jumped back, dropping the flashlight. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, grabbing Tim's arm. They ran up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut. Their hearts were racing, and neither of them spoke. But they both knew one thing: something was very wrong with the house. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The whispers were louder now, and they seemed to be coming from all around her. She tossed and turned, but every time she closed her eyes, she felt like someone was watching her. Around midnight, she heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it, expecting to see Tim, but no one was there. She stepped into the hallway, and that's when she saw her, A little girl standing at the end of the hallway, her hair long and tangled, wearing a white dress that looked old and dirty. The girl looked up at Sarah with sad, hollow eyes. "Help me," she whispered. Sarah's heart stopped. She blinked, and the girl was gone. The next morning, Sarah told Tim about what she had seen. "I think the house is haunted," she said. "There's a little girl, and I think she's trying to tell us something." Tim looked scared, but he nodded. "What should we do?" "We need to find out who she is," Sarah said. "Maybe there's a reason why she's here. Maybe she can't leave." Sarah and Tim spent the next few days researching the house. They went to the town library and asked the old librarian about it. At first, the librarian didn't want to talk about the house, but after some convincing, she finally told them the story. Many years ago, a little girl named Emily lived in that house with her parents, the librarian said in a low voice. One night, there was a terrible storm. Emily's parents went out to help a neighbor, but they never came back. Their car was found in the river. Emily was left alone in the house. The librarian paused, her eyes filled with sorrow. No one knows what happened to her, but some say she never left the house. Some say her spirit still wanders there, looking for her parents. Sarah and Tim looked at each other, chills running down their spines. "We have to help her," Sarah said. Chapter 6. Setting Her Free. That night, Sarah and Tim returned to the basement. They knew the small door was the key. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the door again. This time, there was no cold wind, no whispering. Inside, they found a small hidden room. In the center of the room was a dusty old doll. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "This must have been Emily's room," Sarah whispered. "She must have been hiding here, waiting for her parents." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the whispers returned. "Help me." Sarah picked up the doll and held it close. "Emily," she said softly, "we know what happened to you. Your parents didn't come back, but you don't have to stay here anymore. You can go now." For a moment, everything was silent. Then the room began to feel warmer, and the whispers stopped. Sarah and Tim looked at each other, and they knew Emily was finally free. After that night, the house was quiet. The whispers stopped, and the eerie feeling that had filled the air was gone. Sarah and Tim's family continued to live in the house, but it never felt scary again. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would think about Emily and wonder if she had found peace. And though the house no longer whispered, Sarah knew that somewhere, Emily's spirit had finally found her way home.